Welcome to World of Warships, and yes, it's been a while, and today I want to talk about the new patch and what I think about it, and I will show you certain gameplay scenes in the background so that you're knowing what I'm talking about. Well, the first thing is obviously the new patch 0.6.0, which brought the new Captain Tech Tree skill, or skill tech tree, whatever you want to call it, with it. And there was some massive changes. And I have to tell you right away, I think it's not completely a failure, but there were some drastic issues that I just think shouldn't be in this respect implemented into the game. First of all, I am a German battleship driver, and I love German battleships because they just perform really good in the matter of the game to a certain degree. They have massive drawbacks in other respects where the other two battleship nations currently, the Americans and the Japanese, just don't suffer from. On the other hand, they just feel alive. They can tank more damage from other battleships if you know what you're doing, and they excel in close quarters. Namely, their fast turret rotation speed, their fast reload for the main armament. A few ships have even torpedoes, like the Tirpitz, the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau, and have very strong secondaries, like the Gneisenau, the Scharnhorst, the Tirpitz, the Bismarck, the Friedrich der Große, and der Große Kurfürst, which is the tier 7, 8, 9 and 10 German battleship line, including the premiums. So what they always were good for were, also having this hail of fire of high explosive shells going towards the enemy. And now we have a few new skills within this tech tree. It got flipped around, so it got lowered from tier 1, tier 3, 4 and 5 to just from tier 1 to tier 4. So that means to achieve the highest skill you needed previously a 15-point captain, and also you needed you needed to decide yourself between specific builds. There was not too much in terms of options. This has changed, and I think the biggest impact is a deliberate nerf to German battleships, and I want to point out why. Now, I have my arguments, so please give me the time to walk you through my thought process, okay? So, let's begin. First of all, now you have just to have a 10-point captain to achieve the highest tier. That's a good thing, yes, right? Yeah, it's good. Then also, now you have still the 19-point captain maximum, but now you have also the super captain. So when your captain reaches 19 points, their earned experience don't disappear in the void, but they go towards a free captain experience point pool, so to speak, from which you can also train other captains. That's also great, but to get to a 19-point captain takes a while. One good thing is that I previously had a 17-point captain, and then Wargaming changed a little bit the requirements for the amount of experience that you get for the higher tier points. So now I practically have an 18-point captain, which is great. The bad thing is my previous battleship build is no longer not available. Why? Because the costs for the individual skills were shifted around a little bit. Some of the skills were also buffed and or nerfed in certain respects. And specifically for the German battleships, it is a bad thing. Why? Now because you have to decide yourself to go either full survivable mode or full damage dealer mode. Or in one respect, one specific build is the full rage ahead mode. Or skill build, so to speak. Let me explain. Now, I already made a video about this, but I didn't release it because I kind of forgot two things to mention. First of all, there is the bad habit of now players getting kind of pushed to be very reckless, which is an absolute dumb thing in my opinion. On the other hand, the other two nations, like the Japanese and the American battleships, they don't need the kind of distinguishing between the two modes. They can go still for full survivability and some other perks, and they still have enough points for all that. For the Germans, it's kind of a different story, because you need the full secondary build. Otherwise you're doing it wrong, especially with the Bismarck, Friedrich der Große and the Große Kurfürst. Believe me that it is a deliberate nerf for the German battleships. If not deliberate, they kind of screwed up the German battleship line without knowing them. So them being devs, knowing what they're actually doing and working for, I just point my finger at it and say this was a deliberate nerf. Now, why is that? German battleships are in fact the best performing on the battlefield in terms of receiving damage, dealing with it, but also dishing it out, and win ratio. But there is kind of just the thought to it that they fit the meta of the game best. I remember when I played the Colorado that it was unplayable because it was nerfed in so many respects just for having big guns. And just a slight buff just simply made the ship playable. For German battleships, they are on completely the other side of the spectrum. Now, to summarize the three nations in terms of battleships, you have the Japanese, which are the long-range snipers, so to speak. They have not the very best anti-air. They also don't have the very best secondaries, except the Yamato, and to a certain degree also the Fuso, but just under very special conditions. And to be honest, I love the Fuso. I think the Fuso is by far the best tier 6 battleship, and I respect it even when sitting in my Bismarck. The Fuso is that great as a long-range broadside damage dealer. On the other spectrum, we have the Americans, and up until tier 7, they really go really well with the dreadnought design. So when they're bow on, they can tank the damage. They have big guns, lots of them. They're also more on the mid-range section. They don't have really great secondaries, and also you have to wait up until like tier 7 up until you get really great AAA, but then you're really like this anti-aircraft bubble, so to speak. Especially the tier 8 is insanely good when you spec it for that. For the Germans, you have practically turtleback armor. That means it's impossible to citadel a German battleship at close ranges. So no battleship in the game, not even the Yamato with the biggest gun, can delete successfully a German battleship just like that. But German battleships also kind of have drawbacks and advantages combined, so to speak. First of all, their main armament is overall relatively small, but you have the highest rate of fire. You have fantastic turret rotation speed, but you have disastrous dispersion on your volleys, especially at mid to long ranges. The next thing is you have disastrous shell performance against angle chips, but when they're broadside on, you regularly over-penetrate and don't deal the damage. Also, your HE shell performance is very bad in comparison to the Japanese or the American one. But therefore you have very flat firing arcs, and the shells are also very fast. If you're kind of a War Thunder tanker, that's the equivalent of the performance of APCR, kind of. While American and Japanese shells perform like normal solid shells, or solid shots in this respect. It's a bit complicated with the damage and the fuse sensitivity, the fuse delay and so on. It takes just too much time to explain that. Now, we just didn't reach the core of the main problem. Well, the next problem is that the World of Warships community complained a lot about the high explosive damage and also the fire damage, and how long the repair time consumable or repair party consumable takes to be there again, and then you take immense amounts of damage, and cruisers actually can go in a duel against battleships and are better. because the battleships are predictable. Cruisers can avoid their salvos if they have a really on-point captain. You know, the player is very experienced and so on. I've did it myself. It's disgusting to just rip out of a battleship 10,000 hit points while you take just 2,000 in return, and while you set this guy on fire. So in this respect, it is just disastrous, and this patch also made it worse with the inertia fuse that gives the HE shells 30% more penetration power, but therefore you have a 3% less fire chance. So that actually tells you right now that you have kind of a trade-off. On the other hand, you have a tier 3 skill that buffs the chance of fire by 2%, and there are 2 or 3 flags that boost the chance of fire again. So at the end of the day, you have better high explosive damage. Still, we are not at the core. Okay, for a complete secondary build for the German battleship, you need 3 tier 4 skills, 2 or 3 tier 3 skills, 1 tier 1 and 1 tier 2 skill. You just don't have the points for that to combine the survivability and the aggression mode and the kind of the secondary build. American and Japanese battleships don't need the secondary build. They're maybe there for kind of the Yamato, but that's more like an exception, because it also has the 7-kilometer base range like the tier 8, 9 and 10 German battleships do have. But you know, you take away kind of the uniqueness of the German battleships. They were the aggressive battleships. They were the ones who pushed, who gave your team the chance to kind of engage the enemy. They were tanking and dishing out the punishment. They were just, you know, the distraction for the enemy team. They focused on them, but they also got a big paddling for it. But now you either have to fulfill the role of a tanker or a kind of a berserker. Berserker is basically the more damage you take, the more damage you can deal out in the conjunction with the adrenaline rush skill, which is a tier 2 one. I highly recommend it. Basically, for every 1% hit points you lose, you gain 0.2% of faster reload for all your armaments. At the moment, it is not for secondaries, but in the future it will be, according to Wargaming, because they had difficulties to program it right. I don't know. What that practically means is that I call this adrenaline rage. You just have an extremely aggressive playstyle, reckless, and you're kind of the flame to burn through the enemy. On the other hand, it's just such a reckless playstyle. You can't get superintendent for the extra heal. You don't have the reduced fire chance, so you're constantly on fire on more locations than all the other ships behind you that are not the tankers but can take the skill. Also, you don't have the reduced cooldown rate for the repair party consumable. At the end of the day, you live on borrowed time and on your hit points, while other battleships just can snipe from long range and get away with it, and at the end of the day then have still the hit points and the duration, and also enemies with reduced hit points to deal with in late game scenarios, which the German battleships then can't do anymore. But German battleships are disastrously bad at sniping from long range because of the bad performance of their shells against armor, in conjunction with the low damage output, even with citadels, respectively for the Bismarck for its tier. And you know, this is kind of not very nice. So at the end of the day, Wargaming didn't come up with a solution against the high explosive spam. It's a deliberate nerf for German battleships, because they have to decide for the one or the other but can't take both anymore, while other nations' battleships don't suffer from it. And it was actually a buff to all the high explosive spammers. It will take me hours to talk you through all the changes that came with this patch, but I am not impressed. And so there is not really more to talk about. At the end of the day, I went for the full secondary build because that's what I was always looking for. I went with the Adrenaline Rush to give me better reload for my main armament and hopefully in the future also my secondaries. I have to say it's quite impressive that suddenly you can fire nearly like all 21 seconds with your Bismarck's main armament instead of 25, which is also already a short time. And with the Scharnhorst, which is the tier 7 German premium battleship, you now can fire every 17 seconds. That is just terrifying. On the other hand, you are then at the edge, so you have to think twice if you engage the enemy or not. Anyways, I think I have to stop it right here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comment section what you think about this new patch. If you agree or disagree, are you another nation's battleship driver, and do you think now it is more equal again, and you know there is a reason to drive American battleships again? And what do you think about the changes for aircraft carriers? Make they actually sense, or is it the same mess like before? That's it for me today, so thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other maybe soon on the waves of World of Warships.